It's hard being the first because you don't have a blueprint. You're sort of just winging it. So it was really important for me to show kids that, people of color can be in all spaces, as opposed to having the people of color be the background character. And I don't do it in such a way that it's sort of like, oh, look at me, I am, the Black inventor coming to your class. It's very subtle. It's just, if you notice it, then yay for noticing.
Hello, I'm Bruce Berman, the host of Understanding IP Matters, a podcast series that looks at how IP rights affect creators and impact businesses. Thank you, listeners, for making seasons 1 and 2 a success. Understanding IP Matters episodes are available wherever podcasts are streamed and on understandingip.org. Arlyne Simon says she is blessed to have not one but 3 careers: biomedical engineer, author of science books for children, and teaching K-5 educators how to bring invention education into the classroom. Her mission is to inspire young inventors everywhere and change the perception of what an inventor looks like. Dr. Simon is a successful inventor and entrepreneur, having developed a blood test that detects when cancer patients reject bone marrow transplants. She has designed everything from syringes to supercomputers and ultrasound machines. She currently works as a solutions architect in Intel's Health, Education, and Consumer Industries Group. Dr. Simon is author of the award-winning Abby Invents picture book series and a 2019-2021 American Association for the Advancement of Science ambassador, providing a national STEM role model for girls. I spoke with Dr. Simon from her home in Portland, Oregon. Welcome to Understanding IP Matters.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I'm super excited to be here and to talk to you today on my favorite topic, invention education.
Well, it's one of my favorite topics too, so we have something in common right there. You have degrees from Georgia State and Georgia Tech. Did you grow up in Georgia? That's where I just came from this morning. I was in Atlanta. And what was life like growing up?
I absolutely love Atlanta. I did not grow up in Atlanta, actually. I grew up in Dominica, a tiny island in the Caribbean. And I lived there until high school. And then I migrated to the United States. Growing up in Dominica is just as you imagine life in the Caribbean to be: very laid back, very chill, really, really good foods, stewed chicken, curry chicken, good music, reggae.
So what are you doing here?
I ask myself that question all the time. But yeah, that's when I fell in love with science, is in Dominica. I come from a line of educators. My paternal grandmother was a principal of a primary school. And it would be very common to hear the villagers refer to her as Teacher Ilva growing up. My dad and most of his siblings started off teachers for elementary or high school and saved up enough money to then migrate to get their college education overseas. And my mom, when I was growing up, she was a preschool teacher, and then she became a primary school teacher, and now she's a principal of a primary school. So education was always something very strong in both sides of my family. And I think because my mom, as a preschool teacher, you have to have a knack of getting kids to be excited about learning. She got me really excited about science. It would be very common for me to come home from school with a caterpillar on a branch, and then she would get the jar, and I would get leaves and make sure my caterpillar is well fed with some water.
So when did you know you wanted to invent? You're interested in science, but inventing is a different animal. So how did that happen?
That happened in graduate school, and it happened by, I would say, chance, really. Growing up to be an inventor, that's not something that was on my life to-do list. My PhD advisor at the University of Michigan, while I was getting my doctoral degree there, he was the one who saw the work that I was doing and said, before we go present this at a conference, we need to make sure we protect their IP. We need to file a provisional patent. And that was my first time somebody ever mentioning to me patenting. And I remember just feeling very confused as to why are we patenting and not publishing. I thought, the goal of graduate school was all about publishing scientific articles. And he was the one who sat down and explained to me that, yeah, we are going to publish this, but what if we eventually want to launch a business on this technology? We want to make sure that we protect your IP. And so he guided me through the process of writing my provisional patent, getting all the figures, talking to the tech transfer office at the university. But yeah, it was all because of him that I became an inventor. If it wasn't for his guidance, I would just have published.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. And you went to, this was at Georgia Tech?
No, so Georgia Tech was for my undergrad in chemical engineering. And then University of Michigan was my graduate school.
Ah, how early do we need to start to impart the invention or creator story? How early in education?
I think as soon as kids can read. Even before they can read, I received a really cute video the other day from a little girl who can't read yet, but she's memorized the words of the Abby Invents Unbreakable Crayons book. And before she can read, she knows that she can be an inventor. So I think before you can read, when kids are born, we give them balls, basketball, soccer ball. We take them to dance classes. They learn tennis. We don't really ask ourselves how old they should be before they learn a new skill. And similarly, I don't think we need to ask, what age we should start talking about inventing to kids. It should be as soon as possible. That way they grow up knowing that they really can be anything that they want to be, an athlete, a musician, a dancer, and an inventor, because you can be both. It doesn't mean that you have to choose one or the other. Maybe because you like sewing, and maybe as a kid, I loved making dresses for my dolls. I had a toy sewing machine. Maybe if I had become a seamstress, or even, today, if I still dabble in sewing, I could invent something that makes sewing a bit more efficient. I could invent a new way of crocheting. And so I think we don't have to choose an age to start talking about inventing. It really should be as soon as possible.
And was that one of the motivations behind the Abby Invent series?
Absolutely. Because, like I said, it wasn't until my mid 20s that my advisor told me I could be an inventor. And I really don't think that I needed to have waited that long to know that that was a possibility. And that was definitely one of the motivations behind the Abby Invent series. I was very intentional with naming the series Abby Invents. Abby means gives joy, and invents, it comes from the Latin word inventus, to discover. So put it together, Abby Invents literally means that there is joy in discovery, because there is joy in discovery. It is absolutely magical. And that really was the motivation, is to get more kids and more girls and, kids of color to know that inventing is really just problem solving. I think sometimes we use these big words, like we say STEM without actually breaking down STEM as science, technology, engineering, and math, and kids don't know what STEM means. So sometimes I think when we talk to kids, we just have to be simple. Inventors or problem solvers. And that is really what Abby does in the series. So they know the frustration of, I'm trying to color a teddy bear or whatever I'm coloring, and my crayon, it keeps breaking. It broke in two. And as a problem solver, what am I going to do if my crayon breaks? I'm going to invent the world's first unbreakable crayon. And it's not going to work the first time. It's not going to work the second time. And, I want kids to know that even if you fail, it doesn't mean that you are a failure. It just means you made a mistake. And that's what Abby does. She fails, but she just keeps going, and she gets her first patent. And, now kids start talking about patenting. I get the emails from parents saying, my daughter is now said that the garage is her lab, and I can't park my car in there because now she's doing whatever she's doing in the garage. Or when I speak to kids, they're like, well, can I buy unbreakable crayons? Do unbreakable crayons exist? And then I let them know that, again, with inventing, every inventor approaches the problem a different way. So the solution in Abby Invents Unbreakable Crayons is Abby's version of how she could make it. But now you can make your own. And so then they start making their own unbreakable crayons and they test it. So yeah, it's a really beautiful thing to see kids start relating to Abby's character and, now see themselves as inventors.
Do you think the Abby series and invention education in general, does it help students to respect other people's creativity, not just their own?
That's a really good question. I believe so, because it also sparks the idea of collaboration. because often, kids will start, sometimes when I speak to schools, I'll ask the students to submit a problem that they would like to solve. And then using my engineering background, I kind of walk them through how they could make their idea a reality. And very often there will be different students who choose a similar problem. Maybe they both want to tackle climate change. And then I will say, well, this is how, your friend chose to do it. This is how you're doing it. What if we combine your ideas? What would that look like? And I think that really does bring that collaborative perspective of inventing. That way kids, again, they learn that inventors are not these lone people who work by themselves, that we work in teams. And sometimes the best idea is really an idea that came from the integration of, one, two, three, four different individuals.
There seems to be an epidemic of plagiarism among students. This is what I hear, at least in schools. And, that's copyright. It's different, but there is a creator behind those things. It seems like perhaps the internet has created an environment where digital copying proliferates. It's just easy. It just seems like water or air. It's all out there. And inventions can seem like that too. I mean, this invention is out there. It's really good. And, why should someone have to pay for it? Does that enter into your discussion or thinking?
Yes, kids love talking about money. So one kid asked me one time, how much money does Abby make from her making unbreakable crayons?
Well, if Abby's on YouTube or Spotify, she's not making very much.
No, she's not. Yeah, so kids do love talking about money and how they can get money from their invention. I think when they're younger, that's the approach they take. And then as you enter high school and college, you have so much homework, then it comes like, how can I quickly finish this? I'm going to look to see what's on the internet. I'm just going to take that, like the Cliff Notes version, and submit as my work.
But do you think that the invention experience, the respect for what goes into an invention and individuals' creativity, whether it has financial value or not, needs to be respected? That's something that's not really being taught in schools.
No, I can assure you, like when I went to school in all these years, that was not taught. And that's a really valid point, that we do need to show students the importance of intellectual property, not just for ownership, but also protecting the uniqueness of your ideas, the uniqueness of your thoughts. And that is something that truthfully could be taught really easily in K through 12. Even if, like you mentioned, copywriting, whatever we put out in the world, it's our copyright. And that's a very simple concept to introduce in English literature or English classes. I don't think it needs to be taught specifically in a class that's called IP education. That, I think, comes from us sort of putting forth that information for educators to be able to speak confidently on that topic, because sometimes educators are afraid of talking about things that they didn't get trained in professionally. And so if there are courses or webinars or blogs or something that simplifies it in such a way that, they now feel equipped that they can teach it to their students. And if their students ask a question, they feel comfortable giving a response. That's some way that we can definitely help mold students to know how IP is important.
It's nice when they have like a turnkey approach with questions and answers and visuals, and it's all there, and just have to kind of understand it and get their arms around it, but it's ready to implement. The UK IP office came up under Cracking Ideas, which is a really interesting program for 7-8-year-olds or so. They have a lot of animations, but they were talking about copyright, and they were chastised, the UK IPO, by, I think it was the BBC and Financial Times, because they were brainwashing children about copyright, that this is something, that someone owns and you can't use it. And, I don't think they were at all. And I think young people can understand the difference between IP right and IP wrong. What's your experience with that?
I definitely need to look this up. I'm wondering if maybe it was a misinterpretation from the journalist part. Because sometimes they may only have read the, I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
I think sometimes there's a fear that if we become so IP sensitive, to ownership sensitive, that it will backfire. I don't think that's a problem for this country at this time. I think we need to be more IP sensitive, both for creators and users alike.
I think so, because I mean, even there's so many kids these days who are interested in entrepreneurship beyond copyright. They also need to learn about trademarks, when they create the logo for their business, even if it is for, selling popsicles or whatever they have in their neighborhood stand. When we teach them about the importance of IP, I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot more trademark filings, or even if it's like even if they just start using the superscript TM on their logos in their neighborhood stand. That starts off as a way of knowing that when we teach students about the importance of IP, even if they may not be able to formally pay to get a trademark, that they can start implementing the simple strategies to protect their brand or protect their work, or when they submit their composition, maybe they put the little C with the little circle around it for no other reason, but just because now I know that my work is copyrighted, that now I can show you that I know and put my little C at the end of my composition. These things I think can be easily taught to students and can be done so in a fun way, not overly politicized or make it seem
Dogmatic,
boring.
right.
Yeah.
One reviewer said about the Abby Invent series, and I'll read this quote: the book encourages kids to see inventing as problem solving, and you had mentioned this earlier, and to be persistent in finding the solutions to those problems. I also appreciate, this is the reviewer speaking, I also really appreciate seeing women of color featured and normalized so prominently in the book as the main character, the scientist, and the teacher.
That was really important for me because, as a woman of color in engineering, there were many parts of my story which was just hard. I am the first person in my mom's side to get a college degree. And on my dad's side, the first to a doctoral degree, the first inventor, the first entrepreneur. And so it's hard being the first because you don't have a blueprint. You're sort of just winging it. So it was really important for me to show kids that, people of color can be in all spaces. They could be the educator, they could be the inventor, they could be the adult inventor and the kid inventor. They can be the students in your class. They can be your friends. And as opposed to having the people of color be the background character, I wanted them to be the protagonists in the story. And I don't do it in such a way that it's sort of like, oh, look at me. I am, the Black inventor coming to your class. It's very subtle. It's just, if you notice it, then yay for noticing. But it's not done in any way to be showy. And that was really important for me because in graduate school, my last 2 years of grad school, I was the only woman in the lab, the only person of color in a lab of 17. And even today in corporate America, like I have a customer meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And when I look at the list of attendees, again, I'm going to be the only woman, the only Black person, the only person of color. And there are going to be at least 12 people over there. And I'm going to have to present. So selfishly for writing Abby Invents is also that I'm hoping in my professional career that one day, maybe one day, I'll have an intern who became a scientist, became an engineer because he or she read Abby Invents and thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a try and I'm going to keep going for it. But that's my selfish reason.
Well, well, I'll tell you, I've read some of them and I enjoyed them. I really do as an adult, and I could see them being very effective for children. Another parent said, if I may, I love that Abby keeps trying even when things are hard. I love that these books show the iterative process of invention. I love that the hero of the books is a Black girl. Representation matters. I love that these books inspired my kids to get creative and try to invent things on their own.
Thank you for reading this. I haven't read these for some time. In Abby Invents the Foldybot, the second book, Abby failed a lot more. I think most of the book is her trying to make a folding machine and it's not working. And in this book, she's collaborating with her cousin Miko. I honestly wasn't sure how parents and kids would respond to that particular book.
But inventing is more about failure than success,
It is,
as you know.
but it is. I know it is. But sometimes when you read like stories, you read Cinderella and Rapunzel, there's not, 90% of the book isn't about failing. But 90% of the story was failing. And, Abby and Miko, they take breaks, they go dancing, they play football. And the way the idea comes for finally solving, making this, at home folding machine is from something simple like looking at a pen and seeing the click mechanism of a pen instead of relating, if a pen has this mechanism, can I implement this mechanism in my machine and sort of make the clothes fold automatically in a machine that's like a washing machine, but now it's a folding machine. And what's really interesting is that sometimes when I read the story to kids, I'll notice that then they'll get a pen from a teacher's desk. And then they'll start opening the pen and they'll look at the spring and they'll start, and you can see like their brain cells like tingling. Now they're thinking, oh, this is the spring that Abby used. I wonder what else I could use with the spring. So yeah, I really do try to incorporate an element of technical realism in the stories, enough that kids think it's real and enough for them to know that inventing isn't like, I just tried, I put A and B together, it works. You're going to fail a lot of times. And it's all about persistence and perseverance to just keep going and learn from every previous iteration that you make. You have a learning and you apply that to your next experiment and you keep going until eventually it works.
So for a future book, here's something. So the pen is an inspiration to incorporate that into the folding machine, but the pen is patented. That mechanism is patented. So you have to figure out maybe I need to take a license for that patent so I can build my new invention on top of that. And that's not for 5-year-olds. It's maybe not for 25-year-olds either, but it's a lesson that needs to be learned.
I think so. That is true. Licensing. There's so many elements of the IP process that needs to be tailored in a way for kids to understand. I have introduced the concept of licensing, but mainly through talking. For instance, when they asked about how much money is Abby making from unbreakable crayons, then I gave an example once of, what if she were to license her technology to Crayola? And now Crayola, every time they sell an unbreakable crayon, she gets $1. And I sort of let them do the math of what potentially Abby could be making.
So here's a question. How did you go from biomedical engineering to children's books? I know you had a background with your mom with teaching, but that's a leap.
I think it sounds like a leap on paper, but in practice, just because of, who I am, it doesn't feel like that big of a leap. And that's because in high school, I love literature, and chemistry and literature were my two favorite subjects in high school. And my dad he had his foresight that said, if you are going to be a scientist, I don't really care what you decide to be. I know you like chemistry, but if you do decide to be a chemist, you need to be able to communicate the science to people. You can't speak in technical jargon all the time. And so he encouraged me to also do literature in high school. And that meant I had a good foundation when I went to college, when I did technical writing or philosophy in undergrad, when I took my chemistry courses or chemical engineering courses. For me to learn the material, I always tried to, in my own notes, to simplify it and try to make it relatable to what I see around me so that I could remember that I wasn't just regurgitating the science. And in graduate school, even when I presented my dissertation work, I remember there were many people in the audience who were not just from an engineering background. There were people in social sciences. And then the comment I received was just like, oh my God, Arlyne, I actually understand what you did. And it's like I presented in such a way that, the professors, my review committee, they could see the technical piece of it. But for the other people in the audience, I told it very much like the story, so they understood the motivation of the work, and I simplified it.
What are you working on these days at Intel, if I may ask?
Of course, you may ask. So as a solutions architect, it means I get to design new healthcare solutions. And so I design ultrasound machines. What that means is I work with Fortune 500 medical imaging customers, and I recommend the right computing hardware like the central processing unit, the graphics processing unit to enhance the image quality of the ultrasound machine. More and more, we sort of artificial intelligence applications being deployed on the ultrasound. So one potential use case would be, normally a lab technician, they would be responsible for using their mouse instead of drawing that line to measure the size of the baby or any tumors that they may see in real time. But with AI, with just like a one-click solution, they can just automatically measure does that measuring for you. So it improves the clinical workflow. So that's what my day job is like. It's pretty fun. I love it.
It's really shifting gears, but in many ways, maybe it's not so much shifting gears. Still the same. You're still talking about creation and creativity. What are some of the other things you've invented and or worked on in different fields?
So many. um,
Were
previously,
they all at Intel or elsewhere as well?
elsewhere as well. Yeah. So previously, I worked in a medical device company and focused a lot on syringes. And I had to sort of understand the interoperability of syringes and how they're used in syringe infusion pumps. Part of that work actually got tied into a regulatory document that now informs other syringe manufacturers around the world how they can design syringes better so that they can make sure that when they're placed in an infusion pump, that we deliver the right amount of drug for the patient. And so that was a lot of material science, trying to make sure that the materials used on the barrel of the syringe and the plunger and the rubber material doesn't allow any drugs or anything to leach into the drug in the barrel. That was really exciting. At Intel, I also worked in the data center group in supercomputing. I wouldn't say I created any technology per se in that role. In that role, I was a systems engineer. And so I got to very similar to Abby and Ben. So I am very much a user-centered designer. And so as a systems engineer, I got to listen to the pain points of the individuals working in national labs. What do they want a supercomputer to look like? What are the power levels, the space, and all of this? And then from an engineering standpoint, now it's partnering with other individuals. Now I'm going to design the server and it's going to generate a lot of heat. How are we going to cool it? Are we going to be passively cooling? Is it actively cooling? Are we using water? And in that role, I felt very much like an interviewer, sort of listening to the sides of every individual and making sure that the requirements written in such a way that when it gets built, it satisfies the requirements of everyone.
What's on their wish list, so to speak, for the device? Do you ever run into like a patent wall? So you have some ideas, you see what you need to do to solve the problem, or you think what you need to do, but you don't have access to that because there's another invention or patents out there, maybe not yet productized or commercialized, that cover that.
That's a really good question. Again, it depends on, the employer I worked with at a certain time. So in some instances, it may be that the technology that you create, it may not get patented per se, because it may not fit that particular company's wish list and IP portfolio. Maybe they don't need to protect that space because they're not, like a super healthcare company. And so you make that decision to not file an IP on it because you don't want to block something useful from coming to life by someone who has the means and the marketing efforts and to bring it to life. And I think that's also one of the things that I do today, where I have lots of ideas for different things that could be used in the healthcare world. But if it does not fit into my current employer's IP strategy, then, it just stays in my head and maybe one day, I don't know, it will happen. And so that's one of the decisions that you make. I think that's one of the differences between inventing in an academic standpoint and inventing in a corporation, where you have to make sure that whatever you bring forth actually fits into the list of things that you want to protect.
Sure. It's a business at the end of the day. You're inventing for business and for problem solving purposes. Arlyne, you've worked to change the perception of what an inventor should look like. What is inventing going to look like, or creating, if you will, a little broader, as we go forward? We're living in a very digital world, a very knowledge-centric world, but also a very dispute-driven, or I should say, politicized world. So, where do you see invention going and creation?
That's a really profound question. I think ideally, I would like, with the digitization of the world right now, what would be really valuable is if creators understand the power of collaboration, the power of collective thought. I don't know how we protect it yet. Like whatever invention you come with, if we are just sharing our ideas freely in hopes for the greater good. But it would be good if there's a way that, I have this thought, this technology I want to create. I don't know how to create it yet, but I know that this is a pain point that I have today. And I know if I have that problem, then many people may have that problem too. But I have no skills in, making it or creating it. Maybe I can draw a widget of what I think it's going to look like. It would be good if there was a forum or something where I could, write this idea, trusting that the people on that forum all think like me. And then maybe they can, and think like me, meaning that, they are aware that this is a forum to share knowledge, to invent things for the world. And that way I can trust that then they won't steal my idea necessarily, but they will help me connect me to the right individuals who can make it happen. And that's what I hope the future of inventing looks like. It's probably, well, I don't know, maybe that's too naive a thought process of how sharing the world could be. But I think if there is such a forum, then there are many technologies that don't exist today that could actually help communities of color or people in developing world. But we'll see.
Sure. Great thoughts. What are some of the things you'd like to work on going forward? This is a final kind of a wrap up question. If you had the time, and your employer was sufficiently broad in their outlook, what would you work on if you could work on something?
What I work on there,
What inspires
so
you or what interests you to
so
invent?
many things interest me.
Too many.
I
You
think
see,
I
that's
would
a
be
problem I didn't have growing up. I was always like, should I go to medical school or law school? Or I didn't have that problem, so it was easy
um,
for me.
yeah, a lot of things interest me. I don't know if you've seen that movie Up, the animated
Yeah.
movie Up.
Uh-huh.
There's a,
Uh-huh.
how the dog, when he sees squirrel, he's like, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. That's sometimes how my brain operates. So, to answer your question, I think if I look from a biomedical engineering lens, there is one area that I am passionate about, but I haven't had time to do anything in that space. And that is with fibroids. So that is these benign tumors that grow primarily in women of color. And I'm at the age where it feels like everybody I speak to has received surgery for fibroids or something. And I don't remember, spending a lot of time learning about this at all in college or grad school. And even when I go to the doctors today, there isn't a lot of options provided to patients for treatment. It's usually we're going to monitor it or we're going to have a surgery. There's no in between. And that I think is a space that's severely underexplored from a research perspective. So that's from a biomedical engineering lens. From a climate change lens, because I grew up in the Caribbean and every year we are pummeled by hurricanes. And these hurricanes are category 4, category 5, and houses get destroyed, livelihoods get destroyed. I am not in any way, shape, or form an expert in climate science, but I think a lot more eyes need to be spent on how can we, is it a matter of we design homes which are resilient to these strong winds? Is it a matter of something to do with the weather patterns that I don't know as a meteorologist that we can sort of look the same way we look at cancer and we kind of figure out, how are cancers begin? How do hurricanes begin? Maybe there are people who are looking at that, but if I had time, I would totally spent a lot of time trying to understand, how do hurricanes get formed? Why do they keep increasing in the categories and getting more and more violent? And if I can't solve anything from a hurricane perspective, okay, if the people in the Caribbean have to live like this forever, what can we do to on the ground to protect their homes and protect the farms and protect the schools? That way it doesn't feel like every year you're resetting the clock.
Learning to live with climate change. I mean, it'd be nice to reverse it or stop it, but if it's going to be here, how do you live with it? Great, great point. Thank you very much. This is very, very helpful, very enlightening to me and interesting. So thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Understanding IP Matters is brought to you by the Center for Intellectual Property Understanding, an independent nonprofit, and its supporters. Listen to episodes at understandingip.org or wherever you stream your podcasts. Follow SIPU on LinkedIn and Twitter. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Contact us at explore@understandingip.org. This episode was produced and edited by Nathan Tower with associate producer Aaron Devereaux at Nonsensible Productions. Content conveyed is for informational purposes only and does not reflect the views of SIPU or its affiliates.